Welcome to be a Mensch. We are about a sixth of the way through our journey through Pirkei Avot, or Ethics of Our Fathers, where we do one Mishnah each week. We are in chapter 2, Mishnah 4. We are through the second half of the Mishnah as it is printed in this book. But in other books, they are divided into two separate Mishnahs. So have it as you will. We are learning Hillel Omer. Yosef Ilan, you want to get us started?
Okay. Where exactly?
Hillel says.
Okay. Hillel says, do not separate yourself from the community by ignoring their troubles. Stay on guard and do not be confident in your ability to withstand temptation until the day you die. Do not judge your friend until you are in his place and can fully understand what he is going through. Do not say something that is not easily understood, assuming that it will eventually be understood after more thought, because it might be misinterpreted. Do not say, when I have free time, I will learn Torah, because you may never have free time.
Okay, this is a packed Mishnah if I've ever seen one. Let's unpack it one step at a time.
Yeah.
We're really unfortunate. We're not going to do justice to all of these statements because it's just not. We're just not going to have that kind of time. Let's start with the first one. Hillel Omer. Hillel says, "Al tiprosh min hatzibur." Do not separate yourself from the community. There are really four. Okay, so for starters, this actually stands directly in juxtaposition to the fact that sometimes we're supposed to be ourselves, not be influenced by others, despite no matter what else is going on. We should be true to Hashem and not be influenced by those around us, right? We say if you're in a bad neighborhood, you shouldn't follow the community. But of course, here we're talking about a proper community and a Torah observant community. So you're part of a community that is doing Torah and mitzvahs, etc., and the community is doing something, and you say, I don't want to take part in it. Particularly, this is referring to four ways. The commentaries bring down 4 ways that a person is supposed to join the community. Number one, and probably most common, literally the word tibur means a minion. Al tiprosh min hatzibur, do not separate in this case from communal prayer. The Gemara in Bracha tells us that God does not reject the prayer of the community, so we should always try to pray together with other Jewish people. You know that this is something that's hard for us right now to do, but we do have a Zoom davening every morning, as many of you know, so you can join it that way. Not that it has the same power as a minion, but it does have power nonetheless. Second, number 2, hold on. Marguerite is trying to come in a different way. Go ahead, Marguerite. Welcome. Number 2, he takes part in the community's charitable endeavors and acts of repentance. So whenever a community together chooses to do a certain act of kindness, whether it's they're raising funds for a particular thing, or whether it's the community is supporting the shul together, etc., a person does not separate himself from this. This is, I cannot stress how important this is. Very, very often, unfortunately, in today's society, because there's like a lot of emphasis put on large donors, and the shul was sponsored by this one, and the kitchen was sponsored by that one. This person gave $1 million, this person gave $500,000. So many people have this feeling like if I give my $18, how much is that already worth? Besides the fact that I can tell you as a community leader that it's worth a lot, beyond that, here is the Torah telling us, Al tiprosh min hatzibur, do not separate yourself from the community when they're giving towards a charitable cause. Yes, this millionaire is giving $1 million because for him, that's $1 million and that's what he has to be giving. But for us, at least for myself, for me to give $18, that's my little mountain to climb, and that's my little tzedakah that I have to give, and that's important for me to do in order for me not to separate myself from the community. Even if I can't give a lot, giving a little bit as part of that collective is very, very important. Number 3, when the community suffers, a person should not distance himself from that suffering. The contrary, we fast and we join in their sorrow. Even if a person is not suffering themselves, this is sometimes a difficult thing to do. The Gemara in Tainis tells us that 2 ministering angels accompany a person if he does not take part in community life. They place their hands on his head and say, this person has separated himself from others, let him not see the consolation that the community will enjoy. In other words, here we're stressing the negative of what happens if you don't do it, but to focus on the positive, how important it is when the community is, whether it's grieving over someone or suffering over something together, even if you are particularly not suffering, it's important to take part in the community in supporting those other ones and consoling those others that are suffering. This cannot be more important or more overly emphasized than during Corona times. I know many people that unfortunately lack or seem, at least on the outside, you talk to them and they lack empathy towards others that are suffering through this crisis. Whether people are suffering financially, some people are suffering financially, that their jobs are affected, or they're literally suffering from the virus, or have a loved one that's suffering from the virus, etc. And it's very, very easy for us to lose sight. It's what we often call a lack of empathy, right? It's often easy for us to lose sight of the fact that there are others that are suffering, and we say, well, I'm not suffering right now. I don't see any suffering, and my friends around me are not suffering. Therefore, the world is not suffering. We have to remember that the Talmud has very, very stringent words for those that are not empathetic and don't recognize that the community as a whole is suffering, and that's important to feel and to console and to be empathetic about that. And number 4 is the person should conform to the upright standards of the community. As the Gemara says in Ksubas, and I quote, a person should always be an accepted part of the community. More specifically, do not laugh when others are crying. Do not cry when others laugh. Do not be awake among those sleeping, nor asleep among those who are awake. Do not sit among others standing, nor stand among others who are sitting. We should go together with the community and do things together with the community, whatever those standards are. I will mention some halachic example. For instance, meaning this doesn't mean if everybody's wearing red, we have to wear red, right? Everybody recognizes that. This is talking about from a halachic perspective. One of the most common examples that occurs to me is Chol HaMoed. Chol HaMoed is one of those instances. Chol HaMoed are the days in between the first and last days of a holiday. So let's say Pesach or Sukkot, when there's 8 or 9, including the rabbinic days, there are 8 or 9 days to the holiday. And in the intermediate days, there is a conflict among different sects of Judaism whether we put on tefillin or we don't put on tefillin, right? Some customs do, some customs don't. And the Chabad custom is not to. And often you'll have somebody who walks into a community, and the halacha is that even if you usually put on tefillin during those intermediary days, if you walk into a Chabad house, you're supposed to not put on tefillin. This is the halachic obligation for you. This is the Jewish legal obligation for you not to put on tefillin, even though it's your custom to put on tefillin. Why? Because you should go together with the community. It shouldn't be like, oh, you're highlighting the differences. Of course, there are different customs. And the same thing is true of a Chabadnik. If Chabadnik walks into a community where people are putting on tefillin, he's davening in a minyan where people are putting on tefillin on Chol HaMoed, he should put on tefillin even though it's not his custom. So that is that. Those are 4 different situations where we see that. All right, let's move on to the second statement in this Mishnah. Do not believe in yourself until the day of your death. I apologize, we're not doing that much reading inside today, but I want to share a couple of examples of people who overbelieve in themselves. By the way, this stands directly in the face of common colloquial wisdom. You know, believe in yourself. You're amazing. You can do it. Believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. Yes, Judaism definitely doesn't want us to have a low self-esteem. We should believe that we can change the world, etc. But we have to recognize that it is all because of Hashem. We should never let our own ego or our own belief in ourselves or self-esteem overpower our belief in Hashem and make us think that we are the ones who accomplish this and not Hashem. I will not speak for anybody else in this class, but me personally, I can never put myself on the level of King Solomon. I can never put myself on the level of Rabbi Yochanan Kohen Gadol. I can never put myself on the level of King Yanai, right? All of these are examples of famous Jewish leaders who were very wise, who were very knowledgeable, who were very Torah observant, who followed the Torah, etc. And because they believed too much in themselves, they erred. King Yanai and Rabbi Yochanan Kohen Gadol, although they were very holy and they were very Torah learned, etc., at one point or another, each of them in their own situation, and some of them we've learned before. We've learned about them before at the table and at Chabad. I remember discussing King Yanai particularly, that they ended up going over to the Sadducees. The Sadducees were the heretics who only believed in Torah Shebechtav, only the written Torah, not in the oral Torah. King Solomon also famously has his situation when he erred. Shlomo HaMelech did not follow the laws of the Torah because of too much belief in himself, where the Torah tells us that lo yarbelo nashim, lo yarbelo susim, that a king should not have too many wives and should not have too many horses, and King Solomon did. And actually, we'll share in just a moment one of the stories where he erred because he had too many wives. The reason that a person should not have too many wives is because they may bring him to go away from the Torah, to make him err. And indeed, there are some stories where King Solomon did err and did go against the Torah.
How many wives did he have total?
Steve, you know that question? I'll look it up. Give me a second. Steve, do you know the answer? I do not know the answer.
That's okay. Not a biggie.
He had
Okay.
700 wives.
Oh, there you go. Wow.
He had
I knew it
over
was a high
700
number.
wives and 300 concubines.
There you go.
Sorry.
I was gonna say the number 1,000, but I wasn't sure.
I just could not imagine having so many mothers-in-law.
Good one. Good one.
That's
I like that one.
Marguerite,
I like that
Marguerite,
one.
you get credit. You get
That
credit.
was great, Marguerite.
Very good.
And also, Zusha, could you lift up that scroll so I can read what Menashe was talking to Rabbi Ashe? I couldn't see the rest of the book.
In fact, I'll ask you to read that in just a moment. You know what?
Okay.
Let's read that now. The next statement of the Mishnah is, "Al tadin es chaverach ad shetagiya lemakom." Do not judge your friend until you are in his place and you fully understand what he is going through, right? You know what they say, right? Don't judge another until you are standing in his shoes, right? So, or until you've walked a mile in his shoes. I think that's the statement, right?
A mile in his
some
shoes.
People, some people I know don't like to walk a mile. Never mind in somebody else's shoes, even in their own shoes. All right, Marguerite, you want to read for us? Go for it. Don't judge.
Don't judge. Once the idolatrous king Menashe appealed to Rav Ashe in dream. He challenged Rav Ashe with a difficult halakhic question to which Rav Ashe had no answer. Rav Ashe pleaded with Menashe to reveal the answer to him, promising to teach it in the name of Menashe. Menashe agreed and shared his answer. Impressed, Rav Ashe challenged him back. So if you're indeed so wise, how did you come to worship idols? Had you lived in my generation, Menashe responded, you would have personally lifted the hem of your cloak and spent after me to worship Avodah Zarah. Rav Ashe understood that in Menashe times, the temptation to worship Avodah Zarah was so strong that even the greatest men could not resist it. When you see someone do wrong, don't rush to judge him. You likely do not understand what is motivating him to act that way. Ask yourself, if I were in this situation with his upbringing, his nature, and his Yetzer Hara, would I be any better?
So it is extremely important not to judge other people until we are standing in their position until we know what they are going through. One famous example of this is King Solomon, and this is one of the stories with his wives. Even though we're not told all of the stories where his wives led him astray, there is just a verse in Melachim, in Kings, which says his wives turned his heart astray. But one of the stories that we do know is that the Medrash tells that Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, used to keep the key to the Holy Temple, right? Remember, Shlomo HaMelech was the one who built the first Beit HaMikdash, the first Holy Temple. And he used to keep the key to the Holy Temple under his pillow. And one time, I don't know if she used blackout shades or how it was exactly that she fooled him, but one of his wives fooled him into thinking that it was not morning yet. It was still night. And it was 4 hours into the day, and Shlomo HaMelech was still sleeping or was still in his room and still thought it was night, etc. And Yeravam ben Nevat, who was one of his advisors, came to scream at Shlomo HaMelech. He says, because they had missed the time for the morning sacrifice. The time for the sacrifice of the morning, right? The Tamid Shel Shachar, the morning consistent sacrifice that they would bring every single morning. So Shlomo HaMelech didn't respond, but a voice called out from heaven and said as follows, and I quote, "Do not judge someone else until you are in his shoes. How many sacrifices will you purposely not bring, whereas you are now rebuking Solomon for having failed to bring only one? and that due to an honest error on his part. Judging another person is considered a grave error, and we're told Chassidus particularly teaches a lot about this. The Baal Shem Tov actually uses a little bit of a play on words. He says, "Al tadin et chavercha ad shtagia lemakom." Do not judge another until you have reached his place. But once you have reached his place, indeed you should judge him. In other words, every time you see someone else doing wrong, instead of judging someone else, judge yourself, says the Baal Shem Tov. Why do I see this in him as wrong? Why am I seeing this, right? Very often we know that when we see other people doing something wrong, we turn to someone else, we say, isn't he such a jerk that he's doing this and this or that and that? And the other guy goes, nah, it didn't really bother me. And you wonder to yourself, why is it that I see this negative thing in someone else and someone else doesn't see it? The Baal Shem Tov teaches that very often, this is Hashem's mechanism, Hashem's way of showing us how to judge ourselves. The reason that we see something negative in somebody else is because Hashem is showing us a mirror-like reflection for us to be able to judge ourselves. So not just is it not, don't judge other people, but like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, be humble before the other person. Like that you can learn how to judge yourself based on things you see in other people. I should mention that this is almost consistent. In other words, even if it's not that this is one of those situations where you're supposed to see what you have in yourself, there's always something to learn from someone else. Even if we look at someone else and we see them doing something negative, instead of judging them and saying that they're so terrible for doing that, perhaps we can look at ourselves and say, this is not something that I want to ever be doing, right? So in general, oh, Marguerite, hi, we can see you now. So in general, this is a good barometer to have in mind. Never judge someone else. Instead of choosing to judge them, see how you can judge yourself in this situation. Because judging ourselves is always a good thing to do. Okay. Let's skip the next statement, okay, which is do not say something that is not easily understood, assuming that it will eventually be understood after more thought because it might be misinterpreted. I think it's fairly straightforward, right? You should be clear in the way you talk, and we've spoken about this topic before. And I want to talk about the last point here. Do not
say.
Hold on, just a moment.
How come I cannot see everybody?
You have to press a button in order to be able to see all the cameras. It's like a button that has 9 squares. Are you on a computer or on a phone?
On the iPad.
Oh, so then you have to swipe. If you swipe along, you'll be able to see
Mm-hmm.
wherever it is. Anyways, so the Mishnah ends off by saying, do not say that when I have free time, I will learn, for perhaps you will never have free time. Reb Simcha Bunim of Peshtichya, who was a famous Hasidic rabbi, states that a person should not say that if he had free time in a quieter life, he would learn more. Perhaps, he states, God wants you to serve him when you lack time. And it is for that reason that he created you. Meaning, perhaps it's specifically the challenge that now when you don't have time, maybe that's what Hashem wanted from you. When you don't have time, you should find time to learn. There's no such thing as pushing. In general, we shouldn't push good things off, but we certainly shouldn't push off learning Torah because you may never have that free moment that you'll be able to learn Torah. But a deeper way of looking at this is, even if you will have free time later on in life to learn Torah, this moment that you have now, right, is calling out to Hashem. It wants you to use this moment, right? This moment that we have right now is a moment that we have to learn Torah. It's a moment that we have to learn. It's a moment that we have to connect to Hashem. And if we push off this moment never comes back, and we'll never ever be able to connect to Hashem in the same exact way that we are today. Because moments do not come back. Okay. This will be the end of our lesson today. A short one, but a good one. I hope it wasn't too many different topics. I know that we jumped around today, but that's the Mishnah for today. It has a topic. So thank you all for joining us for Be a Mensch this morning. And